want to thank all of you listeners out there for continuing to come into the home of truth right here at TFR. I'm absolutely made up every single time I hear that music because I know all of you great people out there, just like me, and all the guests I bring onto the show. That means you're ready for your daily dose of truth. And we need to keep an open mind when the Kev Baker show's on because I go here, there, and everywhere. But I suspect that's exactly what all of you listeners love out there. And tonight's going to be no different. Absolutely no different. The shows recently, each one seems to be getting better after the other one. It's a real roll of form that we seem to be on. We're on that truth vibe, and tonight sharing that vibe with me is Mr. Jimmy Jeans. Welcome back, my good friend. Anthony Patch, I'll be back with him on Friday night for anyone tuning in to hear Anthony. And no, there's no dramas behind the scenes. Anthony is just working tirelessly. But thankfully, over the months and years on this brilliant network, we're such a close family behind the scenes that I can really pester my good friend Jimmy here anytime, and I know that he'll be there at my beck and call. So, Jimmy, thank you once again, my good sir. But get this, I was actually ready to fly solo for 2 hours tonight. It used to really be a daunting thought, but, I was sitting here tonight and thought, well, if Jimmy isn't around, why not? Poor Johnny Whistles, he can't make it tonight. He's had a little bit of a relapse again, so love and prayers to Jono. But Jimmy, thank you for stepping into his and Anthony's shoes tonight.
Oh, those are some big shoes to fill, but I'm gonna do my best tonight, Kev. And you're the quantum mechanic. I don't think I have any problem with 2 hours. You have so much material every night. I'm sure you probably don't even get to a good part of it.
Almost 900 episodes, and I'll give away a little secret, right? I think I've finally sussed how to do this show all on my lonesome, and that means when somebody like Jimmy turns up as well, there's just a plethora of information for us to get into. And coming up right after the break, I want you to stay tuned and be listening in because Jimmy is going to get into something that's unfolding right now over in the US, and this could have serious ramifications for us all. It really, really could. But Jimmy, if we may, I want to go back to a location tonight that really did put this show on the map, thanks to the working relationship I've got with Anthony Patch, because we're going to start at CERN tonight, Mr. Jeans, and I've got a headline here from Science Alert, and it's not the first time that I've read out a headline like this. In fact, it's almost going to sound like deja vu to regular listeners of the show. But this is coming from an author called David Neild, and it says, CERN may have evidence of a quasi-particle we have been hunting for decades. Meet the elusive Odoron. Now, like I say, I honestly do remember, just off the cuff, reading a headline almost word for word, verbatim with this one, maybe sometimes slightly different, so many times now, coming from the world of CERN. And I'll read the first part of this here, and I'll give you my take on it, because it says the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC, the machine we all love to use our imaginations over, and I've added that part in, is the particle accelerator that just keeps on giving. And recent experiments at the site suggest we've got the first evidence for a mysterious subatomic quasi-particle that, until now, was only hypothetical. Quasi-particles aren't technically even particles, but they act like them in some respects, and the newly recorded reactions point to a particular quasi-particle called the Odoron, or the Odoron. It already has a name because physicists have been on its theoretical trail for the past 40 years. Now, they still haven't seen the elusive Odoron or Odoron itself, but researchers have now observed certain effects that hint that the quasi-particle really is there. That would in turn give us new information to feed into the standard model of particle physics, the guidebook that all the building blocks of physical matter are thought to follow. And it says here from particle physicist Timothy Rabin of the University of Kansas, this doesn't break the Standard Model, but there are very opaque regions of the Standard Model, and this work shines a light on one of those opaque regions. These ideas date back to the 1970s, but even at the time, it quickly became evident we weren't close technologically to being able to see the Odoron. So while there are several decades of predictions, the Odoron has not yet been seen. Now then, Jimmy, for me, any time I see any kind of story coming from CERN when it comes to one of these eureka moments, and then when you get down into the devil of the details, they haven't even seen the damn thing that they're making a song and dance about, you know what it says to me? It says, get your checkbooks out. Get your checkbooks out because we need more money. We want to see this hypothetical, theoretical particle now. And that seems to be a common game at CERN, Jimmy. Aside from all the kind of occult and hidden stuff they get up to, the science there is just one big money pit.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, about the money is that a lot of times when they put something like this out, it's not that they don't already have it together. Like they may already have this together, but they just don't want to put it out without getting a little bit of sugar from their sugar daddies, whoever they may be. And yeah, it's very interesting, Kev. This CERN seems to constantly be at the center of everything that's going on. At some point, it does, a lot of points do intersect there. And it's, I mean, just the fact, like some of the things you guys have talked about, the fact that it's the old, an old altar site and all the crazy different things that are supposed to appear crazy, yet they actually represent rituals from antiquity.
Yeah, I mean, that's really something that's stuck out in my mind as well. And we've all been blessed, really, thanks to the work of Anthony and the people he works with, because that's one side of CERN I would probably never have explored. I mean, you called me the quantum mechanic at the start of the show, and it always makes me smile. I love that, Jimmy, I really do. But, you know, I've got an interest in physics and science, and, you know, probably just the particle physics stuff coming out of there and the portals and talk of that, that would have been all I would have really found out about if it hadn't been for that working relationship with Tony, bringing him onto the network. And now we've got all this other stuff. I mean, building it, I know it wasn't built specifically to be a particle collider, but at the time when they built that Centre for Nuclear Research, they obviously knew it. They were doing it above the old site of Apollo's temple, also known the Abyss. I mean, it's bad enough when they go building structures and things like that on ley lines, but when you go and put something like this above that location, you really have to sit up and take note. And it gives you appreciation for the fact that with science, there's a very, very hand-in-hand relationship with spirituality, and there always has been. And, you know, just back to CERN here for a moment, before I get your thoughts on particle colliders in general, Jimmy, I mean, it says here that CERN are even looking at something called the Future Circular Collider Study. And what this is doing is developing ideas for a higher performance collider to extend the research currently being conducted at the LHC once the latter reaches the end of its lifespan. So they're already planning for a new ring-based accelerator. Get this, Mr. Jeans. It's going to be 80 to 100 kilometres as opposed to the 27-kilometre ring they've got now. I mean, think of the money that's going to have to go into building that.
I worked here in the Bay Area. Apple just put a new building together, and it's a ring. It's basically, it's called a spaceship.
Have you ever heard me talking to Tony where I lay out my unfounded suspicions that my gut tells me there's something like a ring accelerator there, dude? I don't know why they've gone ring-based. I know they call it the UFO, but everything I know now, and it could be me just connecting dots that ain't there. I'm seeing patterns that don't exist, but circular building, $1 billion HQ, all of this advancements in particle physics. Tell me I'm wrong, dude. You've been there.
Well, have been there and done some work there, there's certain things I can't talk about because I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But what I can tell you, and this is just from a technological standpoint, and then you can extrapolate it any way you might want to on your own. There's fiber optics going around in a circle there, in a ring. And so we can extrapolate from there what's possible with the fiber optics.
Absolutely. And, we've been talking lately a lot about the fact that we suspect, we're putting this all together, that these ring-based accelerators, be it CERN, be it the RIC at Brookhaven, all of the various ones around the world, when you look at them from an actual quantum point of view, Jimmy, I mean, you've got particles that travel in two directions at once, counter-rotating, and go on to collide. And if you look at a quantum computer at the qubit, well, it's a circular, it's a little ring, and you've got electrons that travel in opposite directions at the same time, and they call that superstate. So really, the actual particle accelerator, the ring at CERN, it's the macro of the micro that we get in quantum computers. As above, so below. I mean, are they building some kind of quantum environment around the planet with these almost giant-sized qubits strategically placed around each continent? Who honestly knows? But what gets me, James, and, maybe I spend too much time watching these TV shows, but they're called programs for a reason. And when you look at them through the lenses of somebody trying to analyze the programming that's going on, there's a common theme in a lot of the sci-fi shows, and it's these damn accelerators. Now, they've got heaps of different ways of portraying them, but something we often see is the fact that they often turn into Stargate-like equipment or technology, and you see space travel and stuff like that. Now, I'm asking you to speculate here, Jimmy, but when you see all of these particle accelerators and you use your imagination to think about what they might or might not be doing or be used for, I mean, where do you land?
Well, right here where I live, they have the Stanford University is very close to me, and they have up here what's called SLAC, the Stanford Linear Accelerator. And it's been here for a very long time. When I was a kid, we used to go up there and skateboard. Okay, but as an adult, I've had opportunity to actually work at the facility because occasionally they do work and they need electricians and technicians to come in and do work outside of the facility people that work there. And there is they constantly paint the inside of the areas where humans and the equipment is. They're constantly painting it with this super intense lead paint because of all the all the things that go on with radiation, and when they're smashing particles inside of this building. It's a long straight building sort of nestled in the hills just outside of Stanford and in Palo Alto, California. So
you're right. They better be using lead because, this is like cosmic radiation that these machines fire off. And we can prove that because at CERN, they take some of the synchrotron energies, they call them, and it's the hard X-rays and things. It's like light. It's light that's produced. And what they do is they funnel that off from the main ring because it's created when you get these particles going round in a magnetic field, right? It's just part of physics. And what they do is, Jimmy, they fire it into something called the cloud experiment. And what that does is they've got, like it says on the tin, clouds in a big chamber. And it's to simulate cosmic radiation, i.e. sunlight, the stuff bombarding us from space, and the effect that it can have on the clouds in the upper atmosphere. So that's the kind of dangerous radiations that are being thrown off every time they fire up one of these ring-based, or like you're talking about here, a linear accelerator. This is crazy science. This is weird science times, Jimmy.
Yeah, and if you happen to be one of the people that takes the job calls because they just come in randomly, no one ever knows when they'll be there. But if there happens to be one and you happen to take that job call and you go do the work there, you got to sign a bunch of paperwork, you know, and they make you go through a whole bunch of changes. You have to go through all these physicals and all. I mean, no, anybody that thinks they're just that you know you just go strolling into one of these facilities, you know, it doesn't happen like that because they make you go through all kinds of rigorous physicals and all that. So they have an exact idea of what your health is before you go in, so you can't come back at them later and try to, you know, hit him with a lawsuit because you got sick or whatever. But I'll tell you one thing. I would not want to be somebody working in there 40 hours a week at all. I'm telling you right now. It's really it's super heinous.
No, absolutely. And as we've come to learn, I mean, it's that same radiation they used at places like CERN to actually map the human genome. So you can imagine, I mean, working around this thing, it'd be like working in an X-ray department, running about naked, the equivalent of that kind of thing over a long period of time. It's not going to do your health any good. And we have to really look here because we have to say, well, do the benefits outweigh the risks? And this Odoron, this new particle that I started tonight's show with, we'll take this as one example. I mean, how does this change our lives, Jimmy? How does this give us a real eureka moment? What does the Odoron really open up for humanity? Is this a free energy moment? Doubt it. Is it going to be the end of world poverty? I highly doubt it. I mean, do these risks that we talk about, do they outweigh the benefits? And I get that there's a lot of medical benefits that can be achieved from particle accelerators. But then on the flip side, you go into the real dark stuff that they can do with opening portals and things, and you have to wonder what this technology really is all about.
I mean, the technology itself and what it seems that, you know, a lot of what's going on now used to actually require hardware. So like, for example, when I was a boy in my town, there was a building where AT&T housed all their equipment, and it was a giant building with all kinds of equipment. And basically, your cell phone now has the same amount of power as can do the same amount of things that whole building used to do. And so now they've even moved away from the cell phone, and they've actually moved to something that doesn't require hardware at all, which is the cloud. And so if you combine the cloud and the ever learning AI that learns, you know, instantaneously, you know, with the quantum computers that are out there and the learning capability and the ability to solve problems, and now there's really no hardware affected by it, so it's in the cloud. I think anything's possible with these machines. And the basic bottom line about a lot of it is we really don't even have a clue. I mean, what we're seeing and what we talk about are the information that is available, and what Anthony Patch can suss out in through his methods and through his sources. But beyond that, we really don't know. And so, but the thing is, the controllers of the planet are the ones that have the money to fund. So it's like we may or may not benefit from what they learn at CERN, but the powers that be will benefit from it, and somehow they'll utilize the knowledge they gain from it and move forward with some sort of technologies that we're not even aware of yet, like maybe floating cities, or, you know, because the magnetics, like we were talking about last week, the magnetics possible with that CERN magnet is what's possible there. We can only speculate and imagine at this point.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to give a big shout out again to the chat room. I absolutely love all of you people over there. Such a huge part of this show. And if anyone hasn't tried the chat room yet, it's tfrlive.com/chat. Big shout out to Stick, because Stick, you've just posted in there a list of, well, possibly all of the particle accelerators around the world. And this is absolutely breathtaking. I never appreciated there was as many as this. I'll just read out a couple from the European list because there's far too many. We've got the Synchrotron Light Facility, Barcelona, Spain. We've got the Institute for Nuclear Chemistry and Technology in Poland. We have got the Cooler Synchrotron in Germany, Area Science Park, Italy, ESS Bilbao in Spain, the Grand Accelerateur National de Lourdes in Cannes, France. You like the accent there, Jimmy? Quite good at that one, eh? We've also got the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research in Russia, the Russian Federation, Lund University, Sweden. I'm looking at possibly, let's see, maybe 50-odd particle accelerators, 40 in Europe alone. I'll need to count that up. But North America, we've got the 88-inch cyclotron, Lawrence Berkeley Labs at Berkeley, California. Anthony talks about that place a lot. Somewhere else that comes up in his books and I've looked into is the Advanced Light Source at Berkeley.
I've done work in Berkeley too at that facility also.
There you go. Another famous one that jumps out the page here. We've got the Brookhaven National Laboratory. We've also got Cornell High Energy Synchrotron Source, the Canadian Light Source. We've got the Crocker Nuclear Laboratory in the University of California, Davis. And then we come down here to Los Alamos National Labs. They've got one as well. Something else that myself and Anthony had realized that we don't point out often enough. And make of this what you will. Los Alamos as a center for woo if ever there was one. They've also got a D-Wave. Just keep that in mind. So they've got a D-Wave and a particle accelerator. That's one place that needs looking into. And I mean, there's so many more in the US as well, maybe 30, 40 here. I'll drop the list into you, Jimmy, so you can have a quick look at this as well. But, even South America, we've got the LINAC at the Centro Atomico Bariloche in Argentina. We've got the Tandem Accelerator in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And there are 3, that's not 1, not 2, but 3 actual accelerators in Brazil. Over to Asia, we've got the Beijing Electron-Positron Collider. We've got the Hefei Light Source in Hefei City, China. Pohang Accelerator Laboratory, Korea. We've also got the Taiwan Photon Source in Taiwan, funnily enough. And here we are, Africa, the Laboratory for Accelerated Based Sciences down in Cape Town, South Africa. Australia, love all our Australian listeners. Much love to you. We've got something called the ANSTO, the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisations at Lucas Heights in Australia. We've got one at the Australian National University, Canberra, Australian Synchrotron in Melbourne, and the Micro Analytical Research Centre, University of Melbourne, Australia. I honestly cannot thank you enough for sending me that stick. That's a very, very handy website to have. But Jimmy, we talk about CERN. And yes, it's the biggest and main game in town when it comes to all of this stuff, right? But I tell you what, dude, when you look at that list, that is very comprehensive indeed. And it begs the question, just why do we need all of these different accelerators around the world? Makes the mind boggle, Mr. James.
I think a lot of it is because it's super illegal to test nuclear weapons. But I think any country with the scientific know-how, the money, and the ability to buy the materials can put one of these together. And there's some holy grail that all of them are searching for, or that maybe they've already found and we're just not aware of. And this machine, I don't want to call it a machine, but this piece of equipment or technology is an integral part to the future of what's going on. And I know it has to do with quantum computing, and I know it has to do with this ring that they're creating. Absolutely.
And I've seen a shout in the chat room about Argentina and the Nazis. We've got 2 in Argentina. I don't know if this is the ones that are connected to them. I'd imagine they were into this technology too. We've got the Tandem Accelerator in Buenos Aires and the LINAC at the Centro Atomico Bariloche. I will be back after the break with Jimmy Jeans, and we'll be getting into some of Jimmy's news today. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back. I'm Kev Baker. I'm your host tonight, and this is the Kev Baker Show. Seeing somebody in the chat room really enjoying tonight's show, and I'm also enjoying tonight's show. Good buzz when myself and Jimmy hook up together. You know, nobody, Jimmy, no offence to yourself, but nobody can replace the Whistler, right? So I'm sure we're both giving a big shout out to Johnny Whistles. And like you were saying, I mean, a couple of nights with Johnny, really good. Seen him last night on the camera too, looking really good. And then, you know, comes on the show a couple of nights and then back to being sick again. No, I hope there's no coincidence there, Jimmy.
I know, that's what I was thinking too. I miss the Whistler, and you know, on all the times that I've had the distinct pleasure of visiting with you here on your show, never once has the Whistler had to pull out his shotgun on me. So I know I'm okay. I must be doing okay.
Absolutely, and you're a man of music, so that already puts you in Johnny's good books. It really does. But you know, TFR, we love to say real people, real radio. Johnny Whistles is one of the realest, most down-to-earth blokes I have ever come across. He tells you exactly how it is, and then he'll make your side split after it. That's just our Johnny Whistles. But you know, Jimmy, you're here with me tonight. You're my co-host. So I'm going to come to you now for what I think could be a very important story indeed. And we only hooked up maybe 10 minutes before the show, so we're kind of shooting from the hip here, folks. That's how it rolls on KBS. But I did see a headline today, and it was something about the Trumpster, the Trumpinator, the Donald. I love giving him several titles. I think he's just quite funny. But he's talking about some kind of military parade over there. I mean, is he going full Kim Jong-un on us?
Yeah, this really... When I mean, I get up really early here on the West Coast. I usually get up around 3 o'clock in the morning because that's when the news starts to break, mostly in the U.S. And I was half asleep and I was making some coffee and I heard something about a parade and I was like, what? And then I went and looked, and sure enough, it looks like what he wants to do is these old style like communist parades they used to have in the old USSR. That's not Russia. That was that was USSR. Russia's just Russia. And when China, those giant, that concerns me. And so I actually, I can't really mention too much about this because I have not verified any of it. I think some of it is verifiable, though, that there's some troops massing someplace near the border of North Korea and China to prevent refugees. And I really, really am concerned with this military chutzpah. I respect our veterans and I respect the military technology. I mean, America is known for their military might and their technology, but just because you might be the biggest, baddest guy in the schoolyard, but you don't have to walk around with your shirt off. Everybody knows that you're the biggest, baddest guy. You don't need to do that. And I just find it kind of distasteful, but I guess Donald is the Donald, I guess.
The Donald is the Donald. And, I think back to when I was in the military, Jimmy, and I had the pleasure and the honor of meeting a couple of guys that were in the special forces. And you're talking there about the biggest bully and things like that. And, true power, true strength. You don't need to boast about it. You don't need to show it off like you're saying. And that was something I found from these guys in the special forces, the real cream of the cream out there. The people that would be sent into these wars that governments decide to have, they're not out there shouting about things. They're not the ones acting all bold and brash, but yet they're the ones that have to go in and do the job when these politicians run their mouths off. It's always something to bear in mind, folks. But I've seen somebody in the chat room, Art Girl, and I want to keep the chat room as included as we can tonight, Jimmy. I really want to make it an interactive show. We might even throw on the phones in the last segment, but she was asking something about, and I'm just trying to find the actual thing here. It's kind of written in almost QAnon code, but it says, how about this one? Is anyone else following this? Kev, I would love to know your thoughts on this story from Art Girl in Norca. And it says, Hawaii button pusher, sure North Korea fired a missile. Now, you know, this whole Hawaiian missile alert, still very open-minded as to what may or may not have gone on. Now, on that there, if North Korea had fired a missile, just thinking about what Jimmy said there about how Donald Trump is so outspoken and bold and brash, especially when it comes to North Korea, I suspect, and this is just my opinion, I mean, it's just my thoughts on it, I think if Kim Jong-un had attempted some kind of launch of any description that wasn't just a test, and they've got spies in the country, folks, they know exactly when a test is happening or when some genuine launch may be on the horizon. You know, I think that would have been all the excuse he needed, Jimmy, to really, he's got a bigger red button, right? I don't know if he would have gone that far, but we'd have seen some public response if that had been the case. Now, there's people out there say it could be some kind of cabal weapon that was fired from some kind of submarine. We had an Argentinian submarine going very publicly missing just lately. And I'm sure there's old Nazi submarines and other submarines we don't know about coming from DARPA, Lockheed Martin, you name it. The theory goes that the deep state, the cabal, they used one of these nuclear warheads that we know have been missing for some time. We had the Dulles Air Force Base incident, I believe, back in 2013, where a couple of warheads were signed out. And it's theorized that they fired off some kind of weapon. We had QAnon talking about the splashdown, the Fox 3, stuff like that. What's your take on the actual weapon or the missile or the warning in Hawaii?
The warning in Hawaii, to me, when you just mentioned that, I hadn't heard that, but what came to my mind was last week when we got together and you played that clip of Wag the Dog, and the part where the actress says, "Can I put it on my resume?" And Robert De Niro says, "No," and she said, "Why not?" And he says, "Well," and she, "What if I do?" And he says, "Well, they'll just kill you." And if this guy actually knows that a missile got shot down, then he better either A, be quiet, or B, go on vacation, because here's the thing. If I'm Trump or I'm America and this guy thinks he's got a missile, you can be sure we have plenty of stuff to neutralize missiles in the air. I guarantee you that. I'll tell you that. I can't be more specific, but I'll tell you that missiles can be neutralized if you can hone in on them. So if I'm America, let him shoot his missile so I can see exactly what he has and what his capabilities are, and then not do anything about it, and then go ahead and prepare myself to get myself into the most optimal military position and warn all the people that may be affected by it, i.e. China, Russia, plus, like you mentioned, the Olympics are getting ready to happen. So, man.
I'm in on that there, right? Because this is one of these weird situations again. This is where you have to question the level of theatre going on in geopolitics, because, I mean, you must have been living on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, if you haven't realised that there's a bit of a standoff between Kim Jong-un and South Korea and the US, right? Now, we've got these Olympics coming up. Excuse me. And what's happening at these Olympics is quite confusing when you set it against the backdrop of this World War III scenario that could start at any minute, because you've got South Korean athletes and North Korean athletes are going to walk out together under a unified flag. The North Koreans are sending their actual cheerleading team down to this, and they're going to be singing Kumbaya and collecting golden medals together. Yet at the same time, Jimmy, we're told that this demilitarized zone, I mean, you go there, you're going to get shot in the head for trying to get out of North Korea, right? Because defecting to the south is the ultimate sin. Yet at the same time, they've got Olympic teams, one Olympic team between the two countries. I mean, this is crazy. It really, really is. And I mean, I don't blame anyone out there for thinking that the whole world is a stage. I mean, something like this is evidence of that, surely.
The script writers have gotten better and better as we've progressed into the future, into 2017, for sure.
Hey, Jimmy, I'm not intending to put any fear out there. I'm not some date setter, nothing like that. But, you don't have to be some kind of political analyst or military analyst to realize that while these Winter Olympics are on, South Korea has got the eye of the world on it. And Kim Jong-un knows that. Oh, he knows that. So we talk about windows for false flags when bad news drops over here in the West, like the memo, the cabal could do something to distract us. You better believe that this is a window of time for something happening over there as well, because, there's no point doing anything if nobody's going to see it. And that doesn't make sense, I know. But think of the impact of something happening as everyone's watching, say, the skiing final or the final of the figure skating. I don't even know what goes on at the Winter Olympics. The bobsleigh team, Cool Runnings, Jamaica, that's about my level of knowledge.
Yeah.
But you can imagine the actual spectacle, Jimmy, the propaganda value of something happening during that.
Well, I'll tell you this, it's something that's really interesting, and maybe when we go into the news break, I'll jump out and see if I can grab something. The technology that they're going to be utilizing in Japan for these Olympics is literally going to blow people's minds. The facial recognition, the tracking and tracing of every single person, it's super intense, and this is happening on the fly, so clearly I don't have this at my fingertips. I'm just telling you.
It's really interesting because, this is what we see now, isn't it? You get the Olympics, you get the World Cup, stuff like that. And you really see the security measures that are in place, all the new technology they've got at their fingertips. And it gives you a window into the world that we're moving into. It really does, because all of our smart cities are going to have exactly the same surveillance installed in them. And yet when they're at the Olympics and when they're at the football matches, it's to prevent terrorism. Everyone's a suspect, right? So why do you need that level of security in your own city? Are you a suspect? Seems to be that we are the persons of interest. But, just when we're talking about all of this almost war footing and strange stuff around the world, this is something you've mentioned to me before, Jimmy. I'm not sure if it was in private or on air, but it was to do with the EU and the setting up of a European army. And I've got this story coming from News Wars today from an author called Dan Lyman, and it says the EU threatens force against countries refusing migrants. Now, it goes on to say that European globalists are preparing to, quote, force Central European nations to accept mandated migrant quotas and open borders. And this is according to the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban. Now, following a meeting with fellow Fidesz party officials, Orban posted a short video on Facebook summarising the threat levelled by Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel at Hungary and allied governments, vowing to stand firm in defence of European civilisation and Christian identity. Quote, the presidency of Fidesz has discussed yesterday the announcement of the Belgian Prime Minister that they will, if necessary with force, obligate Central European countries, including Hungary, to accept migrants, Orban said. And he goes on to say that according to their plan, this will happen in June at the summit of the Prime Ministers in Brussels. Our presidency has taken a stand. We cannot give in to extortion. We will fight those who want to change the Christian identity of Hungary and of Europe. Now, Orban's statement comes partly in response to recent comments made by PM Michel, in which he warned, quote, we have formulated an ultimatum against the countries of Visegrad, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic and Slovakia, who refuse solidarity in welcoming migrants. In the absence of a consensus, we will use qualified majorities at the end of the first semester to decide without them. Now, as InfoWars reported earlier this week, Hungary is also embroiled in a bitter battle with the United Nations in the development of a new treaty on migration and is prepared to leave the negotiating table altogether, citing a total disregard for dissenting viewpoints by the unelected authoritarian body. Now, just there's another whole heap to that. Good article there. It's an interesting read. But, when you're talking about the EU using force, Jimmy, to actually make countries take migrants that perhaps they cannot even cater for, I mean, European army starts springing to mind, brother.
I know. And, the thing is, the bottom line, no matter how you look at it, I mean, they put numbers out there that say differently. But I think if you look around the world at countries and you look at the demographics of these nations, you can see clearly that Islam is overtaking Catholicism and different forms of Christianity across the planet, because the Muslim peoples reproduce themselves, and they have large families, whereas these other demographics, these other skin colors, these whites and different other nationalities necessarily don't reproduce as much. And so consequently, throughout the world, they know how they can see through these there's programs that basically look at the populations of the world and how people are reproducing, and they can project which populations are going to grow. And, clearly the Muslim populations are growing, and all these nations know that. And they have to integrate Islam into the existing Christian culture, because at some point it's going to overtake. And then at some point Christianity will become a smaller religion, just like Islam seemed to be before all these wars started.
No, it really is. I mean, this is such a touchy topic, especially living in Europe, because who am I to condemn any of these people from leaving these bombed out countries in the Middle East when it's been our governments over here that have been hugely responsible for doing that? However, you have to step back and take a look at the bigger picture and realize it was done by design. Now, since all those images of the refugees that were flooding out of Syria and people calling it an invasion of Europe, I mean, you only have to look around places like Sweden in particular, Germany, France, Spain, to a lesser extent the UK, and you can see that in amongst these people, poor people, the majority, there was also sleepers. Let's not be naive about this. Let's not be naive. And I'm not one for Brussels dictating to me who we should or shouldn't take, especially when there's people in this country born and bred here who can't even get a home themselves. And that's nothing against these people who want to move here, because like I say, who am I to deny them the opportunity of some better life, the genuine ones? It's a very, very hot topic indeed. And, you look at places like Sweden, Jimmy, and wow, I mean, that over there, that's like some globalist petri dish. It really is. And if you want to have a look at the way that they want the world to be, just take a look at Sweden, folks. And I'll tell you something, it isn't very pretty. It's not pretty at all, Jimmy.
The thing about this whole thing is it's an integration issue. And the thing is Muslims, Muslims are doing their thing, and the world is a free place, and Muslims have been allowed to have their religious places of worship in every country across the world. No one's ever said they couldn't. But the thing is that they have to, when you integrate, means that you exist and you allow others to exist and allow them to have their form of devotion and their form of worship. Because someone worships a different deity or devotes their love and prayers to someone other than, whichever person you might believe in, that doesn't mean that just because there's more of you, that the other religion doesn't has ability to exist in and of itself. And that's the issue. And that's mostly the issue with all these problems, the racial issues across the world. It's all integration, because we don't respect each other. We feel that everybody has to everyone has to assimilate into this one sort of thing. And so if everybody could exist in their own communities and still have their own way of being, and integrate, but allow each other to have the respect and allow each other to have our lives the way, we want to have them, then everybody could live in peace. But the thing is, the way it's set up now, there's people running people and putting people, doing nasty business. And a lot of people are getting blamed, and like in a blanket form, not just Muslims, but also Christians, for activities that actually have nothing to do with the devotion and worship of any deities.
Exactly. Well said. Well said. And, religions, I've always looked at it. I mean, it's the barriers that the government have used to divide us. It really is. Divide and conquer. And I'm one of these people that thinks each to their own. And I really think we're missing an opportunity. I really do. Because if we did all respect the fact that we all have the right to worship our own gods, I mean, we could actually come together, Jimmy, and it sounds a bit satirical, but I mean, think about it. I mean, we could be partying 365 days a year if we were to celebrate all the religious holidays together, to learn about the different religions and respect them along the way throughout the year. All these different festivals, from all the Muslim ones, all the Christian ones, all the Jewish ones. You get my idea, dude. We would be partying and feasting 365 days a year, man. Kumbaya.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little kumbaya. But it doesn't seem like, things are not set up to go that way. It looks like there's going to be ultimate clashes of civilization at some point, because we don't have orators that can, we don't have people that can come together and speak together and come up with a solution to problems, because, everybody's too different, and we just don't have a forum where we can do that. The United Nations is not that. I mean, that's a big, giant, bureaucratic nightmare that it takes 1 million years to get something done. And, the world's moving at the speed of light, literally, like we talk about with fiber optics. And things change rapidly, and the world is not changing and getting together quick enough. And technology's moving on. And if we don't come together soon, the people that have the technology are pretty much going to be running what the rest of us are doing, period. I put that link for the Olympics technology in the chat room. That's TFRlive/chat.
I'm just trying to find something here, because I read a story today that I really think it's going to really mess with the heads of all these racists that do still exist in Britain, right? Because, get this, I laughed when I seen this, because I was thinking to myself, well, how did the racists deal with this one? Cheddar Man, the first modern Briton, had dark skin and blue eyes, DNA analysis shows. And it goes on to say here, and I'll drop a picture in the chat for Jimmy, and I'll get round to, maybe Jimmy will put that in the chat room for all you people out there. For the first time, it's possible to look at the face of a man who lived more than 10,000 years ago. The modern Briton, who had dark skin, blue eyes, and black curly hair, has been reconstructed using groundbreaking DNA research. Nicknamed the Cheddar Man, the young man's skeleton was found in 1903 in Goff's Cave in Somerset. But while initial reconstructions portrayed him to be light-skinned and brown eyes, the full DNA analysis has shown him to have, quote, dark to black skin. Now, research by the Natural History Museum and University College London suggests that the light skin tone associated with Northern European ancestry actually developed later in evolution. Now, that's quite interesting, because, we have the whole out of Africa theory, hypothesis, shall we say. And it was always one of those things, well, where did the white Europeans come from? And it goes on to say here that a, quote, Western hunter-gatherer hailing from Spain, Hungary and Luxembourg, 1 in 10 British people today will share Cheddar Man's genes. His ancestors had originally migrated to Europe from the Middle East. Now, his arrival marked the start of a continuous population in Britain, with the previous populations having been wiped out before him. And the oldest complete skeleton in Britain, the fact he was found in a cave which was cool, dry and consistent environment, helped preserve the DNA. So there we go, Jimmy. You know, us originally, us Brits here, we came from dark to black-skinned people. I wonder how the far right are going to deal with this one.
Yeah, I know. This is these are one of those things, but this actually ties right in with like a lot of what we talk about with Egypt, and how the migration happened, and I think this ties right in because you see a lot of the Celtic traditions and a lot of the Celtic magic and the magic that comes from right where you live, that very area. Those blue-eyed, red-haired people may very well be descendants and may very well come from these darker-skinned people that might have migrated, because your skin would have to be dark, right?
Oh, loving it. Absolutely loving it. We'll be back on the other side. We've got more ancient world news to come. Lots more to enjoy right here on tonight's Kev Baker Show. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Jimmy Jeans is my special co-host here tonight on the Kev Baker Show, moving into hour number 2 already. Can you believe it? You know, I'm starting to realise now why you jokingly call me the quantum mechanic, Jimmy. I really do, because one thing we have to appreciate when you go down to that quantum, that weird world of the quantum scale, time barely even exists. What is time? And when we're doing this show, it sounds awfully cheesy, awfully corny, but time, absolutely, it dilates, it does something weird. I don't know what we're doing together here. I don't know what happens when that theme music starts on TFR, but something comes together. It's magical. It truly is. And the chat room as well. I was speaking to Jimmy during the break. You know, you guys out there, you rock it, guys and girls. Sorry, don't want to offend anyone. But, you know, if we want to make this more interactive, like Jimmy was saying to me, he says we should get the chat room to throw in their own questions as well. And I was talking in the past about nights when there's no guest on, opening up the phones, stuff like that. That may still happen in the last segment. I don't know. There's still so much to get into here. But I think, Jimmy, I think this chat room idea, I mean, I could even do the 2-hour show myself that way. I could just get the chat room to interrogate me, dude.
Yeah, I think the chat room could actually be your co-host, and you guys in the chat can interact with Kev, and he can just, you know, interact with you, and then, you know, you can do it right now too. Go over to TFR Live/chat, and you can join us. There's a whole bunch of people in there, and it's got like a neighborhood kind of pub feel tonight. And everybody looks like they're having a good time. So come on over and check it out. And like Kev's saying, come on in, throw the questions in, or maybe throw some interactive information about the subjects we're talking about. We really appreciate it. The chat room really makes the shows here on TFR great.
It's definitely different. And I mean, there's chat rooms and then there's chat rooms, right? And back in the day, you might be thinking this is one of these vicious places where trolls and things like that hang out. Oh, no. Nothing could be further from the truth, in fact. And, you know, so much can be gleaned and learned from the chat room alone. Sometimes after the show, I'll scroll up for 5 minutes and look at some of the comments I've missed. And the amount of golden nuggets of information that you can kind of sift through and pick from there, Jimmy, that's what makes it so much different here. And that's why it's all about the listeners. It really is. And before the break, we were going back in time, as myself, Jimmy, and a lot of the hosts on this network do, because how on earth's name can we understand this crazy world that we live in today if we don't even have any clue about where we came from in the past? And Egypt is somewhere I could talk about for hour after hour. and this coming from the Daily Mail today, archaeologists, unearthing two 4,000-year-old buildings. Let me just stop there. Here we are, 2018, Jimmy. And you remember back in the early 1900s, all those black and white images and sepia pictures of the kind of people investigating the Valley of the Kings and uncovering all of these secrets. And yet here we are, still today, over 100 years later, and it's still, absolutely to this day, still giving up its secrets. That baffles me. It really does.
I know, it's like a never-ending treasure trove. And the more we dig, the more we find. And the more we find, the more those lines of congruency come together, man. And it's just like you do here on this show. That's why I call you the quantum mechanic, because you bring a whole bunch of different things together, and then you show how they're integrated or how they could possibly be integrated. And that's the main thing we're talking about too earlier with the peoples is integration. It's the same thing with technology, and it's the same thing with the ancient sciences that people try to call rubbing two sticks together and make-believe alchemy. That wasn't make-believe, and there's not a reason why they save the information and hide it and make you join a secret society to learn about it, because these sciences are magic, and magic is science. And if you look into Egypt, that's what you find every time.
And magic can be power as well. And that's exactly why this kind of ancient science is occulted from us. Spot on, Jimmy. And it goes on to say here that the archaeologists have actually uncovered workshops, once used to make bread and beer. Archaeologists recently uncovered two Egyptian buildings dating back to 2400 BC. The scientists from the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute found the buildings while excavating an ancient city in southern Egypt. They discovered well-preserved buildings in the Nile Valley from a time in Egyptian history that is considered a turning point. The pharaohs had started to invest in provincial regions. And according to the archaeologists, the two buildings are from the earliest known time the area was occupied. And of course, while all this is going on, you've still got the Scan Pyramids team at the main Giza Plateau. They released the information, Jimmy, about that mysterious void that nobody else had located before. And they were using the cosmic radiation coming from space and new technology to detect that hidden void. It's all going on in Egypt right now. And like I said in opening this, it's still got secrets to give up. I really do believe that. Edgar Cayce talked about the Hall of Records at the Sphinx. And Edgar Cayce, for anyone who might not know, he was known as the Sleeping Prophet. He wrote a number of books, and I believe he was actually remotely helping people medically. I know, get that, folks. Look into Edgar Cayce. He was just going to sleep, dreaming up things and writing it down. And some of the stuff he came up with, very, very interesting indeed, Jimmy.
I've been around some floods, okay? And when the floods happen, after the flood's over and the water recedes, there's a bunch of dirt everywhere and, rocks and this and that on a small scale, what I'm talking about. Maybe a couple inches, maybe a foot or two. But if you think of the kind of flood that they talk about in these ancient, stories from antiquity about the floods and all the different books and all the different philosophies and different peoples all around the world have similar stories. The kind of water and displacement that would happen and the kind of dirt that would be moved over the top of civilizations. Anything is possible at this point. We could literally, as the technology progresses, start literally finding everything that's been missing and that we've been searching for and that Plato wrote about, Atlantis, these civilizations like you talk about over in there. There's pyramids over in the Ukraine.
I'm telling you, dude, myself and Anne, sometimes when we would travel from Glasgow up to the north of Scotland, ever since I found out about that Bosnian pyramid, check that one out. I mean, this looks basically just like a hill. I mean, it's been covered over in vegetation, and it sat there totally, obscure for year after year. Nobody bothered with it. And it was only when somebody took a really close look and then aerially took a look down on the site and then started some basic excavations did they realize that, you know what, we actually have something here. So that's Bosnia, Egypt. The other night I covered the fact that the Sudan is the most pyramids in the actual world. Get that? We've got them in Indonesia, South America. They're everywhere, right? These pyramids are absolutely everywhere. And probably, Jimmy, the further we dig down, we'll find even more in places even more obscure. But like I was saying, when myself and Anne drive up the road or we get the bus up, there's some of the hills in the Cairngorm mountain region in Scotland where you look at it and you think, I mean, okay, it's maybe just pareidolia, that thing where you see patterns where they don't exist, but some of these mountains look like perfect pyramids. They truly do. And who knows? Maybe they're in Scotland, maybe they're in Ireland, maybe they're absolutely everywhere. Covered one on the show the other night, a potential new one, just off the coast of Mexico, 8.5 miles wide, Jimmy. 8.5 miles, new pyramid. Imagine the size of that thing. And of course, how many more lie around the oceans in the world?
These civilizations were also in tune with the natural environment from what we can tell. And so I think, being able to get inside of one of these, I mean, that giant, I think that you put that video up on your YouTube channel, didn't you? The one about the 8.5 mile pyramid.
Yeah, I done a show about it. I put that on. Yeah, it's over on the YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, see, that's something to me that's really interesting. What kind of environment might exist in a pyramid that's 8.5 miles wide at the base? Is that that's at the base? How far deep underground does it go? At this point, we're just seeing what's at the surface.
Exactly. And you mentioned not long ago the fact that you've been around floods. And I'm going to be doing a show next month on Oak Island, the mysterious woo of Oak Island. And, this current year's search team, they arrived there, and because it had been an extremely bad winter in Nova Scotia, there had been flooding, some of the beaches had been washed away and stuff like that. But they've got a metal detector comes in. And this is what he was explaining. He loves floods because this almost brings some of the more ancient stuff to the surface. It shifts all the soil around, and some of those secrets that I say Egypt's ready to give up. A good flood in any part of the world, that really does bring up the secrets of the past. I'm really looking forward to doing that show because I love going back and looking backwards in time because, like I said, Jimmy, there's no way we can understand the world in today if we don't even know where we came from, what we came from, and what we were doing in the ancient world.
Plus, they just they have a bunch of theories because they have pieces of the puzzle, but they don't have the whole picture. And so they come up with these sciences and these theories based on only what we've learned in this period of history that we've been here. And so they try to piece it together. But I think, there's a lot of pieces that are missing, or that people that we're not aware of have unearthed this technology and are trying to utilize it in a way that we don't understand. Just like we were talking about earlier with CERN. Maybe CERN is some sort of a blueprint type machine that they, this ring that they're coming up with, this newer idea might be something along the lines of that movie with where Contact, where they got this flat 3D drawing they didn't understand, but then when they looked at it in 3D, all of a sudden they saw this machine that they made that this person could get in and go in a wormhole. So maybe what we're dealing with in these ring type technologies are some sort of understanding of ancient science that now has come to the forefront.
No, absolutely. And, having looked at many a picture of the machine, CERN itself, doing all my fancy promos with the Photoshop, stuff like that. You know, it does, when you look at that circular kind of pattern to it, when you look at a cross-section of the pipe, one of these detectors, we all think of that in our head. You know, it looks almost akin, similar, you could fit the Stargate in there out of SG-1. And I know that comes from a TV show, but if you look into some of the stories from the Gulf War and, you know, in the early 1900s as well, there are lots of tales out there, lots of accounts of Stargate technology being recovered from places like Iraq. So, you know, when you watch these TV shows and they depict the CERN and other particle colliders as, you know, some kind of portal, some kind of traveling system, even a time machine in some of them, you have to wonder what is going on. And I've seen somebody in the chat room, I'm just going to see if I can scroll up. It was Illuminati, no pyramids in Australia. Bang on, absolutely bang on, none that I know of. However, I remember covering on the show before this story, and it was 5,000-year-old Egyptian hieroglyphs turning up in, wait for it, Australia. And these are referred to as the Gosford glyphs. And they're an intricate set of symbols which is believed to have been carved some 5,000 years ago by ancient Egyptians who visited Australia. Now, this is considered a hoax by many and ultimately evidence of ancient Egyptian transocean voyages by others. The curious set of symbols have produced mixed views from researchers around the globe. But to add to this, I would say that bear in mind, during some of the excavations around Egypt, there were boomerangs that were also recovered as well. And that sounds to me like there was some kind of exchange of goods, gifts, and everything else going on there. And again, this gives us, like, Jimmy, almost a global civilization. These people weren't confined to their own countries, rubbing sticks together. Far from it. These were seafaring people, and they were obviously a global civilization, right?
Right. And, you know, it's said that, okay, the emerald tablets of Thoth or Thoth, however you might say it, no matter how I say it, someone's going to be in the background, you know, correcting me.
Tomatoes.
Yeah. So, but the point is that when he wrote these emerald tablets and then he went away, he had trained a bunch of these priests of the temple. And these emerald tablets were actually used when these priests dispatched from Egypt across the planet to make the person what they had to say valid. So you saw the same thing with the Aztecs. You see these same things. Basically, everything comes from Egypt out, and that's where Thoth is said to have left the atmosphere while the flood happened, and then came back down in the land of the brown-skinned savages, where he, at that point, cowed them with his magic ability of science, the magic science, and then proceeded to build the civilization from there. And those are the people that migrated out after they learned at the temple from Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice-born.
Wow. And we're going to do a show dedicated to that one night real soon. But, you know, I want to go back to these hieroglyphs just for a moment, if you don't mind, Jimmy, because there's actually a translation here, and it's contested if these are actually genuinely 5,000 years old. I get that. However, but like I say, I think something that really puts it into context is the report of boomerangs and things like that turning up in Egypt. But it says here, on the east wall, it says, "For His Highness, the Prince, from this wretched place in this land, we were carried by ship, engraved for the crown of Lower Egypt, according to God's word. My fellow Egyptians call from this place in this strange land for the god Suti. I, Nefer Djezeb, son of Khufu, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, has brought the god Suti. The prince was kind and benevolent follower of sun god Ra. For 2 seasons, 8 months, he directed us eastwards, wary, but strong to the end, always praying, joyful, and smiting insects. He, the servant of God, said God created the insects to protect his people. I myself am hardened, have gone around hills and deserts, in wind and rain, with no lakes at hand, blessed by the falling nights when I hide myself completely out of reach. In our last camp, I cooked fowl on hand and brought rain, but hurt my back carrying the golden falcon standard, crossing hills, desert, and pools of water along the way. Plants are withering, land is dying. This is our lot from the highest god of the sacred Mer. The sun is pouring down upon our back. O mighty Khepera, this is not what the oracle has said. Our hearts are overturned, but are not broken. This regal person, Nefertit Ru, came from the temple of God in Penu, Egypt. He came from the house of God. He was the son of Khufu, king of Upper and Lower Egypt. He, who died before, is here laid to rest. May he have life everlasting. He is never again to stand beside the waters of the sacred Mer. Then clasp him, my brother's spirit, to thy side, O Father of the earth. Now, there's also a translation from the other wall as well, Jimmy, but I find that really, really interesting indeed.
That is compelling, and that is absolutely beautiful. Please drop that link to that in the chat, or if you could drop it into Skype. That was fantastic.
And you know, I'll go for the west wall. We've still got time here because it says the snake bit twice. We, followers of the divine King Khufu, mighty one of Lower Egypt, lord of the two Adzes, we shall not all return. However, we have to continue. We cannot look back. All creek and river beds are dry, and we are dismayed. Our boats are tied up with rope. Death was caused by snake. We gave egg yolk from the medicine chest and prayed to Amun, the hidden one, for he was struck twice. It was a hard time for us all, weeping over the dead body and keeping to the protocol. Seated all aside, our men watched the funeral with concern and deep love. How the mummified body was buried in the red earth section. Then we recovered ourselves. We walled in the side entrance to the chamber with stones from all around. The chamber was aligned to the western heavens. I continued and impounded the daggers of our men. The three donors of eternity were connected to the rear end of the royal tomb and sealed in. Now it says the source of this translation, the burial site of Lord Neferti-Ru. That's not Nefertiti, it's Neferti-Ru by Dr. R. Young. Now I've dropped a video in the chat as well, but that almost describes there somebody of importance, Jimmy, being struck down by a snake and dying, and you know what followed after that. I mean, this really is an interesting story we have here.
It ties right into the Emerald Tablets and what's described and what happens. And what struck me too when you were reading that first part was that you mentioned the golden falcon.
Yeah, he carried that over the deserts and things like that. Yeah,
right. And so you know how they associate the falcon with the devil or the satanic figure that they throw up. They call Hermes the devil or Satan. The Hermes Trismegistus is also Thoth, and he's also in antiquity, he's a figure that gains a lot of attention. But what I want to bring to everyone's attention here is that if what we're saying, we're speculating, but if what we're saying is that these priests left out of Egypt and went out across the planet, bringing this golden falcon that represents, there's the calling card to prove that you're a valid priest from the temple, I think is really powerful, Kevin. Please, that is unbelievable information. I didn't even know about it. Thank you so much, man.
Well, get this, because I can make this whole world seem a whole lot smaller. And to do that, we're going to start down under, way out the way in Australia, right? Because a story here, and this comes from the ancientcode.com, it says that Lost Continent, Scientists find part of North America in Australia. I am not making that up. It says here that Georgetown in northern Queensland, Australia, was once part of North America, says researchers. That is what seems to suggest the findings and subsequent study of a series of rocks and fossils in the area. If so, it would mean that Australia was connected to Canada about 1.7 billion years ago. The idea that the two continents were once connected is not surprising. Such speculations have existed since the late 1970s, when scientists proposed that this connection dated back to the continent of Rodinia about 1.13 billion years ago. However, and even under that theory, the date was missing. Now, the findings in Georgetown, a small town in northeastern Australia, now seems to be a boost to that theory. The rocks found in Georgetown are different from all other rocks on the Australian continent. However, they show enormous similarities to ancient rocks found in Canada, in the exposed section of the continental crust called the Canadian Shield. Now, before we go to break, I have always been interested in something called expanding Earth theory. And I'm sure at some point we've all had a look at the kind of maps where it's like almost like a jigsaw, where people have put the continents and the land masses around the world almost back together, Jimmy, right? And you get this continental drift, the breaking up of the land masses and things like that. But I think a story like this shows that one time we were looking at a smaller planet that may have been entirely covered by land. And over time, maybe cyclically, there are these major cataclysms which, well, some people attribute to the passing of Nibiru. But what if the planet burps from time to time? What if it decides, it's time for an upgrade? We're always increasing our population. We're going to be approaching 7.5, 8 billion soon. What's one way of adapting to that? And I think the planet's alive, and I think it does improvise, and I think it does adapt, and it does overcome. So maybe an expansion event with all of the population going on now, maybe that's what we're looking at, along with pole reversals. Oh man, don't you just love the Kev Baker Show? We'll be right back after the break with more of this with Jimmy Jeans. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kev Baker. I've got Jimmy Jeans here, and together we are the Kev Baker Show. And tonight we've been getting into a whole host of topics. We started off at CERN, one of the most powerful machines in the world, and all of the magnetic woo that can come from there. And just in recent weeks, we've been talking about the magnetic irregularities and peculiarities that are going on around the planet, around the poles as well. Now, from CERN tonight, we moved into a whole host of other topics. But here we are, just like last night talking about the hollow Earth, we find ourselves tonight talking about another Earth theory. And that is, of course, expanding Earth. And none of this, absolutely none of this was planned. None of this was in any of my folders I had set out for tonight. We've gone kind of off script and into the stream of consciousness that I think produces the best radio that we can ever get. And we're looking at all of these ancient times and expanding Earth in particular. And we ended the last segment on a potential story that would show that Australia, at one time as a landmass, was connected to Canada, no less. Imagine that. Now then, let's think expanding Earth then, shall we? Because as this Earth expands, we obviously seen the introduction of oceans and coastlines would form. And something about humans, we sussed on quite early that the ocean and seas, they're very, very productive to humans indeed. You've got your water there, you've got fish, You've got travel just on the shore. You can set off from there. We get the idea, and these ancient civilizations definitely like to settle around coastlines, around rivers, stuff like that. And then look at the map today. We are absolutely no different. The US absolutely loves to build up and down the east and west coasts over there. And that gets you thinking, doesn't it? Because, we should be learning from our ancestors from the ancient world. And time after time, we've got the story of the 8.5 mile pyramid that we mentioned tonight. I remember one time we had a tsunami over in Indonesia, and what happened when the waters receded, as is the case when tsunamis are forming, there was a whole part of a city that was revealed that had previously been underwater for thousands of years. And the point I'm making here is that, forget the rising sea levels due to global warming, which is the way they try to spin it to our civilization in this day and age. I've no doubt that the sea levels may well be set to rise. However, forget global warming and perhaps think expanding Earth. And, I just hope 2,000 years from now, they're not looking off the shoreline of some new continents going, oh, look what these people used to have over here, there, and everywhere. It's almost like a lost civilization, right? Yet we haven't learnt those mistakes, we haven't corrected those mistakes of the past. We're still flooding to our shorelines. And Jimmy, we talk about floods in the past and stuff like that. And I would imagine that is exactly what happens when you have one of these expansion events. But how can that occur? The people will be asking, where does that water come from? Is it going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights? Perhaps. Or is there a natural reservoir waiting and ready to go, Jimmy? Just down there, way down beneath our feet.
Yeah, I was reading an article last week. They've discovered that there's 3 times as much water a couple hundred miles down in the crust of the Earth than is on the surface of the planet. And so the synchronicity that happens here and the magic that happens on the Kev Baker show, this article that I read ties directly in to the expanding Earth theory, which I also agree with you, Kev, on it. So let's assume that the Earth expands, the magnetic field moves, and the magnetic shift happens. That causes a crack to happen, and the crack opens up, and these waters from below the crust or the plate of the plane that we're on cracks and opens up, and all that water just comes up and floods everything. And then as the water recedes and finds its natural level, new lands are revealed and old bridges are destroyed, and civilizations are cut off from the source of the original technology.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I was just looking at the amazing chat room over there as well.
I know. The chat room is off the hook.
Exactly. And yes, I will be using the chat room to do a 2-hour show soon. Absolutely. But, this is, I love getting into these topics. And, I'm not sure if we'll ever get closer to the truth of what was going on in the ancient world, right? But I tell you, it's fun looking. And another story that I found this week, and this is all down to new technology, again, revealing these secrets from the past. And this comes to us from the Archaeological Daily, the archdaily.com. And it says here that laser technology uncovers the surprising size and density of hidden Mayan cities. Yes, get this, folks, because a new National Geographic documentary, I must mark that one in the diary, is set to reveal a newly discovered Mayan megapolis in what has been called a major breakthrough in Mayan history. Over 60,000 homes, infrastructure systems, and man-made features were once hidden underneath the dense jungles of Guatemala are now being revealed to the world painting a picture of ancient sites that were both larger and much denser than previously thought. And I've dropped it in the chat for Jimmy to look at there. If you could drop that for the listeners as well. I've also got a picture from the actual National Geographic. You can see all of that in the article. And they show you, I mean, this looks like just basically thick, dense jungle. And then when they use LiDAR, light detection and ranging, that's LiDAR, light detection and ranging, what you actually see is, wait for it, a pyramid underneath all of the vegetation. And it goes on to say here that a revolutionary technology called LiDAR helped researchers find the sprawling civilization by digitally removing the tree canopies from aerial views in northern Guatemala. According to the Nat Geo, the results of this discovery suggest that not only is this civilization once or much larger than once presumed, but that early Central American cultures were, quote, more comparable to sophisticated cultures such as ancient Greece or China than to the scattered and sparsely populated city-states that ground-based research had long suggested. In addition to the undiscovered residences, the LiDAR images show lifted highways that connected urban centres, settlement patterns, and complex irrigation systems. Yep, rubbing two sticks together, so they were, Jimmy. Marcelo Canuta, a Tulane University archaeologist and National Geographic explorer, that must be a good gig if you can get it, said that even though the ancient Maya never used the wheel or beasts of burden, quote, this was a civilization that was literally moving mountains. Oh, they still had to throw in there that they weren't using things like the wheel, Jimmy, and that just seems utterly ridiculous.
Maybe they were using magic carpets and they were just floating everything around and they didn't need the wheel.
Yeah, maybe it was like snake charm or something like that. They were just like charming all the blocks to the top of the pyramid. Oh, please.
Yeah. Well, hey, that article that you posted, I dropped it in the chat, TFR/chat for the audience and for the listeners and for the chat room. The modeling on the what this city could have looked like is really just incredible. But also, I wanted to point out, did you know that aquaponics that you've talked about on this show goes back all the way to the Mayans, that they were the ones that originally developed the aquaponics systems, and they used they made ponds on the sides of mountains and then used the natural flow of gravity to irrigate their crops, but then also grow their fish. So they really didn't need the wheel to go anywhere because everything was centrally located, right there in the village or the living system that existed at that time.
Absolutely. I was disgusted the other night. I was really quite angry, in fact, because there was a documentary on, and it was about the Mayans and the end of their civilization. Of course, where did they go? And, you had the Spaniards coming over there, and some of the stuff that they were doing to the Mayan priests and all of the documents and all of the written records that they had. I mean, what a wealth of information that was lost, absolutely lost, just so they could come over here or over there and spread their Christianity. And, one of the things that they were talking about was the torture that these Mayan priests had endured and what they got out of this victim. That's what we'll call him because that's what it was. I mean, can you trust? Is it reliable, the information you get from torture? It's quite topical after Guantanamo Bay and things like that. But the priest had said that they used to give human sacrifices. And of course, some people contest that. But what this documentary done was they took the accounts that were written by the Spanish and they actually traced down this cenote, I think it's a well, Jimmy, where they used to throw these bodies. And there was an account of a young child that had been actually sacrificed in the dying days of the Mayans as they were trying to appease the gods or whatever reason they put on this. But, this diver went down there. It was a really crazy dive. But guess what he found at the end of the dive? It was a young adult male's actual skull. And it confirmed the accounts from ancient times, from the Mayans, of just what was going on there, dude. And it was crazy. It was really, really crazy. But that ancient world, if I had a time machine, I would give anything to go back and have a look at how some of these civilizations really were living. I mean, we've only got his story to go by. And, history's always written by the victors. It's always been the case. And it's always somebody's version of events. But it's just somebody's version. It's not necessarily the truth. And we can only tell the truth if we're there to lay our eyes on it. And even then, it's just our perception of what we're seeing as the truth to us. So I'd love to go back and really, in my own mind, answer the questions of why they were building these pyramidal structures, how they done it. You get the idea, Jimmy. Let's get the time machine going, man.
I know. And the thing that's really interesting to me is the Spaniards, because you hear so much about the Spaniards, but only so much. And you don't hear anything about secret societies or esoteric information out of Spain. But, I don't want to offend anyone, so don't misinterpret what I'm trying to say. But early forms of the Catholicism, okay, when Jesus was brought in with the New Testament and the forgiveness of the sins, they used to get money when they would forgive your sins for whatever you did. You'd have to pay like some dough in. And so that's how they built this giant a giant money pit where they just went around the world and converting everyone to Christianity so that they would have to pay this tax, this forgiveness tax to the church. And so they destroyed a lot of the information. No matter what we get from these interpretations and translations, still in all, it's somebody deciding that a particular symbol that's drawn means this particular letter or something, and then they base all their translations after that on that. And so at some level, if any one of those things is wrong along the way, the whole alphabet could be wrong. And
it's like hieroglyphs as well, dude. I mean, I've always wondered about that. I mean, we've got our kind of modern day interpretation, and I know we had the Rosetta Stone, stuff like that, okay? But I mean, how accurately are we actually interpreting these ancient archaic languages that we base so much of our faith and religions on? It really, I mean, I really do wonder about that. And that's not to offend anyone. It's just in my own mind. I always wonder. I mean, you look at the hieroglyphs and things and you think, I mean, we read out that earlier on, Jimmy, but who's to say there's not the odd word here or there that's actually incorrect that totally changes the context of what we're reading? And again, it's only by going back to that time would we get that first-hand knowledge, right?
Right. And, not to say that any of the taxing that went on has anything to do with forgiveness or the spirit or love of Jesus Christ. But what we're saying is, they used that Jesus Christ to build that church across the world. That's what we're saying. Nothing against Christians or Jesus or Catholics or anything like that. It's just what happened back then, because the Roman Empire had to keep on going, and they needed to do that in a way. And it had failed, and it was off to the side a little bit, and Christianity was catching fire, and they just utilized that and rode the wave. And use that to continue
never let a good crisis go to waste, Jimmy. It's the perfect example of it. Your empire's crumbling. Here's this thing, Christianity, steamrolling towards you. And we're not mocking Christianity. We're looking at it from the Roman Empire's point of view. Well, what do we do here? Well, we'll take off all of our fighting robes and our garb, put down our weapons, and we'll pick up this Christian Bible. We'll build ourselves a big place called the Vatican, and we'll try and rule the world from there. They got their empire back, didn't they?
Yeah, and then they grabbed all the important, esoteric, scientific information from antiquity. They hoarded it. The library burned down, And now they're the only purveyors of all these books and all these antiquity and all the science from that's been preserved, that was preserved for the peoples of the world to utilize in the future when they could understand the science.
I mean,
that's
the Vatican Library, Jimmy. Imagine us getting access to that, right? But, you know, a lot of people point to the information that's in there. You know what really gets me, though? I mean, imagine some of these, like Rothschild Mansion and some of these powerful families. When we see some of these ancient documents that they speak about in public that change hands for millions, imagine the stuff that's on the black market, dude. The stuff that is the real knowledge, the real story of what happened, the real story of mankind.
The secret societies that exist are secret. If you know the name of it, it's not the secret society that's in charge of anything. So I'll tell you this. I've been to some technology meetings here in the Bay Area in Carmel. I visited a person at their home, and they were extremely wealthy people. They drove around in Ferraris that didn't have license plates. And while I was sitting there and we were having a discussion, you know, the room I was sitting in, there was literally 13th century swords, books from antiquity. So we can only, you know, imagine what someone who is searching out these ancient scientific secrets, if you had unlimited funds and unlimited resources to search the world and scour the earth. You know, these people are going back in time right now. You know that. You know that what you were saying earlier with the Stargate, you know, they had an episode in the original Star Trek where there was a Stargate and they jumped through it, and Kirk and Spock went back to the 1920s and they were gangsters. And Spock had...
Sorry, on you go.
No, I was just saying Spock was wearing one of those hats, you know, those old gangster hats to hide his ears.
That's a big secret. I really do. I think, you know, thinking of building ships that can approach light speed and stuff like that, it's all very well, but I think the true kind of universal travel, it's going to be some kind of wormhole system, and it's going to be accessed via natural portals on various planets and unnatural ones like we see at CERN as well. I truly, truly do feel there's something in that whole story. But again, I could be absolutely off my head. You can let me know in the comments in the chat room, and I want to thank you all for tonight. You know, we've still got about 6 minutes left, but I've got a really big show coming up tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to this. Some really hard-hitting information, because thanks to my good friend, Ola Damagard, I haven't been on with Ola in such a long time, but he has hooked me up with somebody called Cody Snodgrass. Now then, he has written the book, The Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing, and you can get that over at lightonconspiracies.com. But just get this, because this comes from the blurb of the book. For over 20 years, I was an independent contractor specializing in sensitive, covert assignments as well as bodyguard work. In 1994, I was given the task to blow up the Alfred P. Murray building in Oklahoma City. The job came from an ex-US military man who told me he worked covertly for the CIA. Now, I refused on moral grounds. My strong opposition to attacking US citizens on our own soil changed my status from a CIA asset into a liability, a private independent contractor who, quote, knew too much. This is the true story about the US Department of Justice's role in covering up the bombing in Oklahoma City on April 19th, 1995, and the secret reasons why I believe it was ordered. Now, afraid to speak up until now, I am very lucky to be alive to tell this story. Hopefully, enough time has elapsed so that I will not be targeted again for retribution, as so many, quote, whistleblowers have been before me. May God bless America and our fellow patriots who have fought and bled for her. Now, Cody is going to be my special guest tomorrow night on the Kev Baker Show. We're going to be getting into all of this, and we'll be getting really into this part where he was almost roped in to be a part of the Oklahoma bombing.
Wow.
Myself and, I'm looking forward to this one, Jimmy. Myself and Ola, we've done several shows together when I first started radio about false flags, stuff like that. And never did I imagine that I would get the opportunity to speak to somebody who is this close to an actual false flag that so many of us know so much about, or we think we know so much about. So tomorrow I'm really looking forward to speaking to somebody who was that close to being on the inside of an inside job. Timothy McVeigh never ever worked for me. I'm really, really sorry. And all the pictures of the FBI bringing out the unexploded explosives from the Oklahoma bombing, that's troubling as well. Well, tomorrow night, right here on TFR, on the Kev Baker Show, we're going to be getting right to the heart of that story. We'll be getting Cody's take on QAnon and all the current deep state shenanigans that's going on as well. Because once you've been a CIA asset, you never really stop having those contacts. And this is going to give us a very important window into the real important stuff that is going down in the world right now. And I can't wait for this one. I really can't. I want all of you here tomorrow, 10 p.m. in the UK, 5 p.m. East Coast, 2 p.m. West Coast, and that's on tfrlive.com. You can join us in the chat room. And Jimmy, this is going to be a big one.
I know. I'll be in the chat room too, for sure, tomorrow. So I hope everybody comes in and get your questions in for Kev's guest, because this sounds like it's going to be a barn burner, man.
It really is. And I can only thank Chris and Cherie Geo and the network here. And obviously, when I say that, that means all of you out there as well, because, I mean, if we didn't have this network here to broadcast on, why on earth would somebody with information like this even consider giving up 2 hours of their time? But it's because they know the power of the reach that we're starting to have on here. We're really starting to wake people up. And just to be a part of this in any way, shape, or form, it's truly amazing. So please, please join me tomorrow for a show I think you can tell I'm just a little bitty excited about. And I know it's really dark information, but as a truther, I mean, this has to be as good as information as you can get. And I can't wait to speak to Cody about all of these things tomorrow night. But back to tonight, and Jimmy, it's been a pleasure. We've got Lockie and Dr. Brooks Agnew. They will be taking up the mic after us. Everyone stay tuned for that. But yet again, my good friend, thank you for stepping in at the last minute. And this
pleasure's mine.
Consciousness, it just seems to work, dude.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine. Anytime, Kev, you are the quantum mechanic, and we have been in a million places tonight that were super interesting, and anyone can extrapolate on any portion of this show and find something that will blow their mind for sure.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure yet again to share this airtime with Jimmy Jeans. You can catch him on TFR right here at the weekends into the microcosm. He appears as well on Freaky Friday from time to time. And I'm sure I will be back with all of you tomorrow for what is going to be a huge show. I'm just going to call it the Whistleblower. Stay tuned, Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew coming up. And for another night, I hate saying this because that means I've got to leave you all now. Wherever you are, make it TFR. And for whistles out there, Denny, touch that dial.